Loma Prieta Earthquake. On October 17, 1989, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck the San Francisco Bay Area, its epicenter located along the San Andreas Fault near Loma Prieta Peak. The cause was a sudden release of tectonic stress that had been building for decades. The quake lasted just 15 seconds, but was strong enough to collapse sections of the Bay Bridge and the Cypress Street Viaduct in Oakland. The shaking was broadcast live as Game 3 of the World Series was about to begin, instantly cutting power to millions and shocking the nation. In Santa Cruz and San Francisco's Marina District, buildings built on artificial fields suffered severe liquefaction. 63 people were killed and nearly 4,000 injured. The disaster accelerated seismic retrofitting across California and led to stricter standards for bridges, elevated highways, and unreinforced masonry structures. Economic losses totaled an estimated $6 to $10 billion, equivalent to over $25 billion today. The cost of repairs and infrastructure retrofitting reshaped California's transportation network and urban policy, marking one of the most expensive U.S. natural disasters of the 20th century. Nepal Earthquake. On April 25, 2015, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck central Nepal caused by the ongoing collision between the Indian and Eurasian plates. The rupture propagated beneath the Gorkhat district, sending shockwaves across the Himalayas and Kathmandu Valley. The shaking toppled centuries-old temples, monuments, and UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The quake triggered landslides that blocked mountain roads and an avalanche that swept through Mount Everest's base camp, killing climbers and Sherpas. Nearly 9,000 people were killed and more than 600,000 homes were reduced to rubble. Rescue operations were hampered by Nepal's rugged terrain and damaged infrastructure, forcing reliance on international airlifts. The disaster underscored the region's vulnerability and sparked global discussions on resilient reconstruction and seismic preparedness in developing nations. The total cost of damage was estimated at $10 billion, roughly half of Nepal's GDP at the time. Reconstruction has spanned years, with international donors and the Nepalese government investing heavily in safer housing and infrastructure designed to withstand future Himalayan quakes. Izmit Earthquake. On August 17, 1999, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck northwestern Turkey near Izmit at 3:02 a.m., catching millions asleep. The rupture along the North Anatolian Fault released energy equivalent to hundreds of nuclear bombs, shaking the region for 37 seconds. Industrial zones, oil refineries, and dense urban centers were leveled. Over 17,000 people were killed, and more than 250,000 left homeless. Fires broke out at the Tupras oil refinery, burning for days. The tragedy revealed decades of unregulated construction and poor quality concrete structures. It also marked a cultural turning point in Turkey, sparking outrage and leading to sweeping reforms in seismic building codes, emergency management systems, and public accountability for developers. The financial cost exceeded $20 billion, crippling the Turkish economy and prompting long-term investment in seismic infrastructure. It became one of the most expensive earthquakes in modern European history. Mexico City Earthquake. On September 19, 1985, a magnitude 8.0 earthquake struck off Mexico's Pacific coast near Michoacan. Though the epicenter lay 350 kilometers away, Mexico City, built atop a drained lakebed of soft clay, suffered catastrophic amplification of seismic waves. Entire apartment blocks, hospitals, and schools pancaked into rubble. Rescue teams, largely composed of civilians, pulled survivors from debris for weeks, becoming a national symbol of resilience. More than 10,000 people were killed and over 400 buildings collapsed. The disaster led to the creation of the Topos, a permanent volunteer rescue group, and prompted Mexico to develop the world's first public earthquake early warning system. The damage cost exceeded $4 billion, equivalent to about $11 billion today. The reconstruction of the capital catalyzed a wave of urban modernization, with stronger codes and citizen-driven reform against corruption and construction. Kobe Earthquake. On January 17, 1995, the Great Hanshin Earthquake, magnitude 6.9, struck the city of Kobe at dawn. The cause was a rupture along the Nojima Fault, slicing directly beneath one of Japan's busiest urban corridors. Despite Japan's advanced seismic infrastructure, the quake destroyed expressways, rail lines, and tens of thousands of homes. Over 6,400 people were killed and more than 300,000 displaced. Fires burned uncontrollably for days as ruptured gas lines and collapsed water mains hindered response. The scale of infrastructure loss shocked the nation and prompted the creation of Japan's Modern Disaster Management Agency. It also accelerated innovations in base isolation technology, now a global standard in earthquake engineering. The economic toll reached nearly $200 billion, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in history. The long recovery reshaped Japan's urban resilience planning and set new global benchmarks for post-quake reconstruction. Valdivia Earthquake. On May 22, 1960, a magnitude 9.5 megathrust earthquake, the largest ever recorded, struck southern Chile. It ruptured nearly 1,000 kilometers of the subduction zone where the Nazca Plate dives beneath the South American Plate. The shaking lasted over 10 minutes, flattening towns like Valdivia and Puerto Montt. The quake generated tsunamis that raced across the Pacific Ocean, reaching Japan, Hawaii, and even the US West Coast. Entire fishing communities were swept away, and volcanoes along the Andes briefly erupted due to the seismic disturbance. More than 1,600 people were killed, and 2 million were left homeless. The event reshaped understanding of megathrust earthquakes and inspired the first international tsunami warning systems. The economic losses totaled around $550 million in 1960, approximately $5 billion today, a devastating sum for Chile's economy at the time. Reconstruction spanned over a decade, supported by international aid and widespread domestic mobilization. San Francisco Earthquake. On April 18, 1906, at 5:12 a.m., a magnitude 7.9 earthquake struck San Francisco and Northern California. The rupture extended nearly 480 kilometers along the San Andreas Fault. Within seconds, the city's gas mains and water pipes were severed, triggering uncontrollable fires. The quake and ensuing firestorm destroyed 80% of the city, leveling 28,000 buildings and displacing 250,000 residents. Refugee camps filled the city's parks for months. The estimated 3,000 deaths made it one of America's worst urban disasters. The catastrophe transformed seismology, leading to the foundation of modern fault mapping techniques and stricter urban planning for seismic resilience. Financial losses were estimated between $400 to $500 million in 1906, equivalent to roughly $15 billion today. The rebuilding of San Francisco became a symbol of American recovery and engineering innovation in the early 20th century. Haiti Earthquake. On January 12, 2010, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck near Port-au-Prince, Haiti's capital. The shallow rupture along the Enriquillo Plantain Garden Fault caused devastating surface shaking across densely populated areas. The poorly constructed buildings offered little resistance. Over 220,000 people were killed, 300,000 injured, and 1.5 million displaced. Hospitals, schools, and the presidential palace collapsed within seconds. The quake crippled Haiti's government and infrastructure, making coordination of relief extremely difficult. Global humanitarian aid poured in, but slow distribution highlighted systemic weaknesses in international disaster logistics. The tragedy became a case study in the consequences of poverty and urban vulnerability during seismic events. The total economic loss was estimated at $8 to $14 billion, roughly equivalent to Haiti's entire GDP. Years later, the country still struggles with reconstruction, underscoring how poverty and weak governance amplify the toll of natural disasters. The Hoku Earthquake and Tsunami. On March 11, 2011, at 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9.0 megathrust earthquake struck off Japan's northeastern coast. It was the strongest ever recorded in Japan's history. The rupture displaced the seafloor by up to 10 meters, triggering a massive tsunami that reached inland as far as 10 kilometers. Entire towns such as Riguzen Takata and Kesanuma were erased. The tsunami overwhelmed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, leading to core meltdowns in 3 reactors and the release of radioactive material. Over 18,000 people were killed or went missing, and millions were displaced. The event profoundly influenced global energy policy and accelerated Japan's investment in renewable power. The combined cost of the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear disaster reached $235 billion, making it the most expensive natural disaster in world history. Indian Ocean Earthquake. On December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 to 9.3 megathrust earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra. The rupture, more than 1,200 kilometers long, lifted the seafloor by several meters, displacing trillions of tons of water. The resulting tsunami devastated coastlines from Indonesia to East Africa. Aceh province in Indonesia suffered the worst, with entire towns erased within minutes. Waves reached Thailand's resorts and struck India, Sri Lanka, and Somalia hours later. Over 230,000 people were killed and millions left homeless. The unprecedented global humanitarian response reshaped how the world coordinates relief, leading to the establishment of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System and advances in seismic ocean monitoring. Economic losses exceeded $15 billion across 14 nations, while reconstruction efforts reached over $14 billion, funded largely through international donations, one of the largest relief efforts ever mounted. Shaanxi Earthquake. On July 28, 1976, a magnitude 7.5 earthquake struck Tanshan, China, an industrial city of 1 million residents. The rupture occurred on a previously unknown fault, producing violent ground motion that lasted less than a minute. The quake struck just before dawn, collapsing nearly every structure in the city. The death toll officially reached 240,000, though some estimates exceed 650,000. The destruction was compounded by a strong aftershock the following day. Entire families were buried in their homes, and rescue efforts were hampered by damaged roads and communication breakdowns. The event shook China's leadership, influencing policy reform and leading to the creation of the National Seismological Bureau. The estimated cost of damage and reconstruction was around $10 billion in 1976, a massive blow to China's developing economy and a driving force behind stricter urban planning and seismic safety nationwide. Shaanxi Earthquake. On January 23, 1556, a catastrophic earthquake struck China's Shaanxi province, estimated at magnitude 8.0. It remains the deadliest quake in human history. The shaking destroyed entire counties across a 500-mile-wide region, collapsing cliffs and triggering enormous landslides. At the time, most residents lived in yaodongs, cave dwellings carved into lowest cliffs, which are highly prone to collapse. The quake buried entire populations within seconds. Over 830,000 people were killed. Historical chronicles describe mountain shifting and rivers changing course. The disaster reshaped the geography of central China and remains a stark reminder of how natural catastrophes can alter civilizations. While no monetary estimate exists, modern analysis suggests that the equivalent cost of such destruction today would surpass $1 trillion, given the scale of structural loss and societal disruption across Ming Dynasty China.